conflict is about the existing of a Jewish state on a Palestinian land.
In Gaza, we gave them land and we got back missiles.
Welcome to our first episode of Hear Both Sides. I am Nina Cassin and I'm your host. The war in 1967 in the Middle East ended with Israel occupying a portion of Jordan's territory, and with that they also inherited a population of Palestinians. Some people call that land the occupied or disputed territories. Some call it biblical Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, and some people call it Palestine. So today's question is, are the Jewish settlements in the disputed territories an obstacle to peace? Joining us, we have Afnan Abu Aresha. She's a Palestinian and works at an Arab elementary school teaching English. She is arguing that the Jewish settlements are an obstacle to peace. On the other side, arguing that the Jewish settlements are not an obstacle to peace, is Sarah Zalta Friedberg. She's a Jewish settler and an artist. And I'd also really like to mention that for Sarah and Afnan, this really is the real thing. They have skin in the game. It's not just theory. So here we go. 6 questions, 2 people, and 12 minutes. Decide to listen, listen to decide. The first question is asked by us here at Hear Both Sides. Do you believe that the Jews or Palestinians have a legal, moral, or historical right to inhabit the area captured in the War of 1967, which is known as the disputed territories?
From the legal and moral point, we can, well, from my opinion, it's the Palestinians do deserve this land because of what happened in the 48, the time that Jews came to Palestine and took the land. From the historical side, in my opinion, even if they have anything historical, I don't think they're supposed to take it, because they promised back then when they wanted to do a two-state solution, that the 67 line was supposed to be for Palestinians. So now they want it back. So I think it's very ironic for them to ask this.
Yes, I do believe that we have a moral, historical, and legal right to the land. First of all, we were here for thousands of years. If we do any archaeological digging anywhere in Judea and Samaria, we'll find evidence to Jewish life. Legal, first of all, I'm going to quote a sentence. So, military occupation are clearly permitted under international law following an aggressive attack by a neighboring state. So, according to that sentence, first of all, according to international law, the military occupation is permitted. And what happened is Jordan attacked Israel at the time, and we won. So that's our legal right. If there was war, and if you lose the war, so you lose the land. And if this is our only place in the world, there are 22 Arab countries in the world, and the Jews have one country. And I think that morally we have the right to exist.
The next question was posed by Afnan. Do you think that if the Palestinians also had their own state, it would go a long way towards a solution for all peoples?
The war began even before Israel existed as a state. So, like the Arabs attacked the Jews before we even had a land. We had our own authority in our own land. So the violence started much earlier. I don't think it's land for peace. We can see it. We can see it in history. We've tried many times going towards that direction, and it failed many times. We tried 5 times, and I'm going to quote all of them. I think this is really important. In 1937, there was the Peel Commission that we offered them 80% of Israel, and they were refused. In 1947, the UN partition offered a 2-state solution, 50-50, and they refused as well. In 2000, in Camp David, Clinton offered 94% of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem as the capital, and that was refused too. In 2008, Abbas and Almer met, and they were offered almost 100% of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem as the capital, and it was refused also. Also in Gaza, we gave them land and we got back missiles and violence and a war. So I don't think it's obvious that if we gave land, we would get peace.
So I think Palestinian country is one, like a realistic solution that we can do. I think it will be a start to a solution. It will not be a solution because we're not covering the whole aspects of the conflict, but it will be a part of a solution to give something to them and something that the Jewish state or Israel took.
Sarah asked the next question. If the solution to the conflict is land for peace, hasn't that already been a failed experiment? Could the conflict be about the very existence of Israel?
The conflict is not about a Jewish state. The conflict is about the existing of a Jewish state on a Palestinian land. You took something that's not yours, you kicked people, killed people to make a state, like a country for yourselves. But that's not moral, that's not logical, that's not legal to do. It still happened. And this is not like, this is the conflict. This is why people are refusing peace, because there's so many things that happen that they're traumatic about. There's still people that live outside of Israel. They're immigrated from Palestine, their land, to other places, and now they can't come back here. So this is the whole conflict, and not having a Jewish state.
Gaza taught us a lot, and if we see that we gave land for peace and we got a war back in return, then what would happen if we gave away more land? It would just be a huge threat to Israel, and we have the right to defend ourselves. I would say that this war is more an ideological and religious war against Israel having a state in general, having Israel as an existing state. We need to have peace for peace.
Another one by Afnan. How can Israel justify being a humanitarian democratic state while it denies basic rights to millions of Palestinians?
Okay, so first of all, I would really like to hear an example of a humanitarian right that is taken away from them. Israel is the only democratic state in the whole Middle East. And if speaking about humanitarian, Israel brings in trucks every day to Gaza with food, with clothing, with medical equipment. They just recently got in medical aid for the whole corona situation. About freedom of movement, I would say that Israel does have, every country actually has its right to her own borders and to protect her own borders. And I think that it makes sense that we'll have security and not let every Palestinian into Israel freely, because we have gotten bombs in the past. We have gotten terrorist attacks in the past. Just outside of my hometown, there's a huge red sign that says that I'm not allowed to go into the Palestinian territory. So I have the same limits as the Palestinians do. Every country has its borders.
Israel doesn't even have it doesn't have a constitution. It has an independence document, and in that independence document, it says that Israel is a Jewish state. It does not even say that it's a democratic state. So I think that just says a lot and express a lot of things. Even as an Arab living in Israel, I can feel that Israel is not a democratic state. It's a Jewish state that only defines like the Jews that lives in it. And with the Palestinians that lives, as I said, immigrated from here to other lands, other countries, and people from outside, like Jews that can come here to Israel and live just because they're Jews, that just says a lot. And it does not show it as a democratic state.
Another one by Sarah. How can you explain that terrorists are being paid salaries by the Palestinian Authority for murdering Jews? Isn't that encouraging violence?
I don't know where did you get that from, but from what I have read and searched for, I know that this is what we call social support, to support the families that one of their family members is killed, like what happens in Israel when one dies or killed or go to jail. The country gives the family money in order for them to live. That's the same thing that happens there. They don't pay them to kill Jews. I've never heard of anything like that happen, and especially not Palestinian authorities giving money to Palestinians, especially not Palestinians authorities.
So the situation today is that the Palestinian Authority are paying the terrorists to do terrorist attacks. The longer the terrorists are in jail, the higher their salary is. So with that approach, there's no way to peace. Instead of the Palestinian Authority paying for education, paying to build hospitals, paying to build schools, instead they're paying terrorists to murder Jews. They glorify the terrorists. So that's definitely not a language of peace. It's a language of violence.
Next, we had Afnan and Sarah see each other's interviews. Here are their responses.
I'm glad people have the chance to hear both sides. I just want to comment on something, on some of the things that Sarah mentioned. One of them is that settlements are illegal, which according to the international law, they're not illegal. The settlements are illegal. And for the history part that she mentioned, I think existing in a country for hundreds of years does not mean you can come and take people's homes and kick them out just because you existed hundreds of years ago in the same land. You can't talk about Israel giving Gaza a land when Israel took Gaza from Egypt. Also, it's very ironic to me when someone says that Israel is protecting the country from terrorists when what's happening in like Gaza is the IDF is keep killing innocent people like Roseanne, that was working as a nurse in a peaceful protest near the borders, and when they killed 4 innocent people who were playing football by the beach, which by the way are not held accountable for what they did. One last thing, you can't call Israel a democrat country when it's basically some shops or some workplaces are preventing Muslim Arabs who wear hijabs from working there.
I'm really glad that everyone had the chance to hear both sides. I'm going to start with something that Afnan said about us taking the land. What actually happened was we were attacked by 5 Arab countries. We won the war and we defended ourselves, just like every other war in Israel. About the terrorist salaries, there's a fund called the Martyrs Fund. It's a fund funded by the Palestinian Authority, paying Palestinians to murder Jews, to join violent riots against Israel, and to do terrorist attacks. Israeli Arabs have every opportunity to flourish in Israel. Israel gives the Israeli Arabs every right that the Palestinian Authority doesn't give the Palestinians, like the right to vote. In education, in Israel, Arabs get many scholarships to study law, to study art, to study medicine. In the government, there are many Arab Knesset members. The reason why there's no peace is because we have different languages. In Israel, we have a language of life, of creation, of invention. We're constantly looking for ways to make the world a better place. Every time there's a country that's in trouble, we're always the first country to come and give a hand. The Palestinian Authority has a language of death. I worked with families of victims of terror, and I went with them to court several times. And every time I went, I saw the terrorist's cruel smile on his face when looking at the families, and seeing his family so proud of him and idolizing him, including a terrorist who murdered 2 soldiers and shot a pregnant 21-year-old girl, killing her baby in her stomach. And every time I saw the terrorist's cruel smile at the families, that lost their loved ones. Afnan, you and I are not that different. We're both around the same age. We both want to build homes. We want to build families. We both even have a hair covering. If you value life, I suggest you fighting to change something in the Palestinian Authority because they value death and we value life.
Be sure to share this episode with your friends and with your enemies, because it's really easy to take sides when you only know one of them. Click below to subscribe.